ever-angry thoughts came to my mind. Grandma did what she had to do, but the times have changed, I'm telling you. The time has come for us to draw the line.
Welcome to another edition of Progressive Community Media. This show looks at media outlets in the New York area with progressive political content. On this edition, I'm again looking at the 5-day-a-week morning show on WBAI, hosted by Michael G. Haskins and several co-hosts, which each have a day to co-host. WBAI is a community radio station which is a part of the progressive 5-station Pacifica Radio Network. I'm John Riley. I host a show called Out FM on WBAI, and I'm also a member of the local station board. Pam Brown is the co-host of the Tuesday edition of the morning show, broadcast from 6 to 8 a.m. on WBAI New York, 99.5 FM, and on WBAI.org. On Tuesday, April 21st, I woke up early to make my way to WBAI to film the 7 a.m. hour. At the time, the broadcast studios were housed at WHCR and City College, but those studios have now moved to 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. I interviewed Pamela after the show was over and asked what brought her to WBAI in the first place.
So I came to BAI through Mario Murillo, who contacted me through someone that we knew, that I knew, who was on the board of Brecht Forum with me. And so that's how I ended up being invited to be a co-host on the new morning show from 6 to 8 a.m. on Tuesdays is my day, but it's every day of the week.
Michael G. Haskins and Pamela Brown collaborate on segments. The following segment was about the devastating tragedy of the sinking of an illegal ferry from Libya that was transporting undocumented migrants to Italy, and the deeper story behind the incident.
It's that time of the week again. It's 7:12, and usually at this time we catch up with a good friend of the show, Milton Alimadi, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Black Star News, also found at blackstarnews.com. Good morning, Milton.
Good morning to both of you. Hi, Pam.
Good morning, Milton. How are you doing?
All right.
Okay. I wondered today, though, if you can report, and, I was talking to Pam before, we were trying to decide what we were going to talk about with our listeners this morning, and this was one of the topics, this really horrible drowning off the coast of Libya this weekend, reportedly of as many as 700 Africans who were attempting to make it on one of these ships operated by smugglers to Europe. I see that you have major commentary on Black Star News, and you go after NATO for destroying Libya, and you explain what role that plays in this kind of tragedy. You also talk about the failure of some African leaders in all of this. We're really looking very, very intently, very closely at this situation off the coast of Africa. Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, well, now they're actually saying it's possible that as many as 800 or more. Right. So, it's going to take a while before they have even a better accounting. But, this is, horrible. And this, number one, a lot of these folks actually pay for these, what amounts to the death trips. They pay as much as $3,000 to even $5,000. They're trying to seek better opportunities for themselves and for their families, right? And let's discuss first the role that the destruction of Libya by NATO played. Libya, in addition to providing billions of dollars of its these funds from its oil wealth to other African countries, also it provided tens of thousands of jobs for migrant workers from other African countries. So this means when Libya was destroyed, the economy is in shambles, all these folks that are feeding their families, in their respective countries, need, other sources of employment. And that's why they're taking this risky trip. And also there's a second factor in that these insurgents from Misrata in Libya, supported by NATO, were actually targeting black Libyans and migrant workers from other African countries, just based on the color of their skin as well. So that made Libya completely inhospitable to a lot of these folks. And then in terms of the economies in their own respective countries, even though we've been reading about economic boom in African countries, like with economic growth of 5% per year for the last 10 years or so, when they talk about this, they don't mention the fact that it actually benefits just the elite in these countries, the political and military elite. So it means that the vast majority of folks are actually not benefiting at all. In fact, in many cases, they're getting severely injured because, as we know, there are a lot of multinational companies that operate in these African countries, and with them, it's about the bottom line. It's not about creating jobs. And then we have the other situation where in many African countries, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, and many other African countries, people are being forcefully displaced from their land. The national governments are using police forces, even the military, to displace thousands of people and then sell their land to foreign multinational companies, including investment funds that, of course, don't care about employment at all. All they care about, again, is the bottom line. And then we have a situation where we've been seeing, for example, in South Africa, where you have other workers from other African countries seeking employment, being treated to being abused, being attacked, being killed. So, you know, Michael, when you factor all these together, you can see why people would still be willing to make those voyages. Last year alone, 3,200 people died trying to make that trip.
Wait, hold on a second. Let's stop there. How many people died in voyages?
3,200 last year. And this year, we have already 1,600. This is the biggest, ugliest, uncovered story internationally.
Milton, how did the 3,200 people die last year?
They died through the ship's sinking.
Through the ship sinking, wow.
Right. A lot of these stories are buried on a page 20 or so, or not covered at all.
Wow.
In the news media. It's as I said, it's one of the ugliest uncovered stories that's going on today.
So, Milton, what's the frequency with which ships making this particular crossing actually sink, and why does that happen?
Because many of these vessels are completely not seaworthy at all, number one. Number two, they're normally overcrowded, very, very packed, because, you know, the captains of these ships are trying to maximize as much money as they can get. So you multiply, for example, let's say $3,000 or $5,000, multiply that by, now they're saying 800 people that may have drowned. So multiply $5,000 800 times. Or who knows? Maybe there was 1,000 people on that ship. So that's why the ships are overcrowded. And as you notice, the captain of the ship was arrested, meaning obviously he's alive. In most cases, they always know how to make sure that they can get away, even when these vessels sink.
In the next segment, Brown and Haskins interview activist Kevin Zeese about the devastating new trade deal proposed by the Obama administration and resistance to it.
Now we have Kevin Zeese. Kevin Zeese is a co-director of Popular Resistance, which is located at popularresistance.org. And he has been working on exposing and stopping the Transpacific Partnership for more than 3 years now. Popular Resistance actually has a campaign called Flush the TPP, www.flushthetpp.org, which is focused on this issue. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Thanks a lot for having me on. Good to talk to both of you.
Thanks so much for coming on. First of all, I think that we need to get just an overview of what the TPP is, because we hear this acronym, we don't exactly know what the details are.
Yeah, this is a massive trade agreement, the largest ever negotiated, nearly multiple times the size of NAFTA. It deals with Pacific Rim countries, and it ranges on a whole course of issues that will affect every aspect of our lives. It's been negotiated in secret now throughout the Obama administration. They have hundreds of corporate advisors who actually see the agreement in real time and can make edits and changes and suggestions. But the Congress members have a hard time seeing it. The public has never seen it. The media has never seen it. Thanks to leaks, mainly through WikiLeaks, we've gotten some idea about it. And it's a disaster on every front. It really is a corporate power grab, creating a corporate-dominated global economy. It expands these trade tribunal justice systems that can put out decisions that even the U.S. Supreme Court cannot overturn. And these trade tribunals allow for corporations to sue governments who put in place laws in the public interest, like to raise wages, stop fracking, regulate banks. They can sue these countries for the profits they expected to make before the public interest law is put into effect. And the trade tribunal, the judges are primarily corporate lawyers on leave from their corporate job, making a decision and going back to their corporate jobs. These are rigged trade tribunals. This is really not a trade agreement. It's really a backdoor power grab by massive corporations. And the good news is that people have been fighting back, and I think we have a really good chance of stopping this trade agreement from becoming law. So I hope that your listeners will recognize the importance of this and get involved.
Well, Kevin, I've got a couple of questions for you about this.
Sure.
First of all, regarding the secrecy. I mean, when I opened and said we hear TPP, but we don't really know what it is, that's a very real feeling that I have, right? Because we don't, I do recall at one point seeing perhaps a WikiLeaks leak of this agreement. What does it mean for this to be negotiated in secrecy? I also was unaware that our Congress people, our, alleged at least representatives, don't even have a full copy or full access to the entire agreement. What is the secrecy really about?
Well, that's a really good question. In fact, when the first Obama U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk was asked that by the media, why do you keep this so secret? His response was pretty honest. He said, because it was made public, it'd be so unpopular, it could not become law, it could not pass. So that's why they keep it secret. This is the first time ever that a trade agreement has been classified as a secret. Recently, when the U.S. Trade Representative met with Democratic Party elected officials in Congress, he warned them that he was going to show them parts of the trade agreement, and if they reported this to their constituents or their staff, they could be prosecuted.
Prosecuted for
Congress
what?
Members. Prosecute Congress members for, telling the truth about a trade agreement, because it will be violating the secrecy, the classification.
Hold on, Kevin. Kevin, wait a minute. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this. That the Congress people could be, for informing their constituents about what's in this agreement?
That's right. This is a classified document. Only those with the top-level classification can see it. And one of the problems is that even staff of members of Congress who have top classification, who are able to see CIA documents and national security documents, aren't able to see this agreement. It's a very highly kept secret, because if people know what's in it, it will not become law. This is a massive corporate power grab. Many things that Obama says he's trying to do in public are the opposite of what he's doing on
this agreement. And the question is, how long is this agreement, or do we guess that this agreement it's thousands of pages, right? So by the time they release this to the public, we won't even have time to read it.
Especially if, this is the key issue really right now that you're asking about, especially if fast-track Trade Promotion Authority becomes law. It was just introduced last week in the U.S. Senate by Ron Wyden, a Democrat sellout to big business, and Orrin Hatch, a Republican corporatist, and in the House by Paul Ryan, the former vice presidential candidate. It's now before the Senate Finance Committee, and what it would do would be it would fast-track the TPP through Congress, where Congress gets a short amount of time to see it, and then they can only vote on the floor debated on the floor, up or down vote, no amendments. There'd be no committee hearings. There'd be no opportunity for public involvement. It would be a rushed-through process of the secretly negotiated treaty.
Unbelievable. And so what are the chances that the fast-track bill actually gets passed?
Well, the Senate is our weaker house. The House of Representatives where we have the best chance. And right now, people are all estimating that we are winning in the House of Representatives to stop fast track. Luckily, almost every member of the Democratic Party in the House has opposed fast track. Just this week, Sander Levin of Michigan, who is the ranking member of the key committee, the Ways and Means Committee, said he sees it as his job to stop fast track. So that's great news that in the House we have a lot of Democrats. We also have about 50 to 60 Republicans, and that could grow, who also oppose it. The combination of those Republicans who oppose elitist, corporatist policies and crony capitalism and really believe in, democracy and the Constitution from their own perspective, combined with progressive Democrats, almost the whole Democratic Party, actually more than just the progressives, is enough to stop it. Now, there's a lot of pressure. Obama is working very hard to pass this. He's calling members of Congress. His cabinet members are going up to the Hill to talk to members of Congress. There's a lot of pressure. A lot of promises are getting made. A lot of threats are getting made. So we have to keep fighting to protect it. We have a website that's a coalition site. The largest coalition ever to oppose global trade has developed around this battle. And so we've created a website called stopfasttrack.com. You can see the couple hundred organizations on there.
Stopfasttrack.com.
WBAI Morning Show co-host Pamela Brown discusses the kind of guests and topics she brings to the show and the important role of WBAI in the New York media market and its difference from WNYC's coverage.
One of the things that we immediately committed to was to highlight the issues in Palestine and Israel each week. And the reason for that is when we started the show, it was just at the edge of the attack on Gaza last summer. And so we wanted to make sure that we developed that throughout, over the course of weeks and perhaps years, that we developed an understanding of what was actually happening and why and the context for it and what the issues in that part of the world are really focused on. So that's one thing that we do every week at 6:30 a.m. with Amin Hussein and sometimes others if he's not able to be on the show. And then the other part of the other kinds of topics that I feel that I'm most committed to are movement building topics, movement based. I worked on Occupy Wall Street, and before that I worked on the anti-war movement when we tried to stop the war in Iraq. And so through that activist work, for me, I feel that BAI is a great space to build a community and build shared knowledge and shared understanding over time. BAI has always played a key role. It's always been a place where progressive and radical voices had a space to share their ideas with the community. This is not a small role. This is absolutely critical at this moment when most voices are being drowned out in favor of two very similar voices. In this context, I'm speaking about party politics. The Democrats and Republicans virtually have almost nothing different to say than each other. And BAI provides an alternative space to the MSNBCs and other, mainstream media corporations of the world. I think that a key issue is, for me, at least, as I think about the show and I think about what segments we would want to have, is this aspect of community and movement building. I think that right now we're in a place of needing to think through some of these deeper issues, and so hopefully we're building an audience, and they're listening each week, they're listening all week, and they're thinking through these issues in a way that I don't think that WNYC really provides.
Pam interviewed renowned filmmaker and professor Tami Gold on the Aronson Journalist Award.
Now we have Tami Gold. Tami is a documentary filmmaker, visual artist, and educator. She is a professor at Hunter College of the City University of New York in the Department of Film and Media Studies. And she is on to share with us about this very important project that she's involved in every year. And it is the James Aronson's Awards for Social Justice Journalism. Good morning, Tami.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good. So can you share with listeners what are the James Aronson Awards for Social Justice Journalism?
James Aronson was a reporter, a journalist, an educator, and a radical thinker. And he's one of the founders of the National Guardian, which sadly we don't have today, but it was a wonderful newspaper. It certainly educated me. And it was really not affiliated with any party. It was a newspaper with a radical, progressive agenda. And it did have an agenda, and that was to really be transparent, report, tell truths that were otherwise not reported. And so James was also a professor at Hunter College. When he passed in 1988, the department that I'm in decided that we should have an award ceremony really honoring social justice journalism. And that's what it is. It's every year. It's the Aronson Awards. And I was thinking a lot about the word social justice because I hear people use it so often. And it feels somewhat empty. And I don't want to just say social justice. It really has to be progressive and radically left. And I think that's what we're saying. We're saying that journalism, media, has to be courageous. And so we really are honoring courageous, risk-taking journalists. And somebody in your last guest, Milton, had mentioned Les Payne. And he is someone who has won the Career Achievement Award of the James Aronson a few years ago.
And maybe you can go through with listeners some of this year's winners.
The Career Achievement Award is going to William Grader. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Grader. And he was a writer for the Rolling Stones, for the Washington Post, and for The Nation. And he's written many books, and he's a real, strong writer and tells it like it is. He's a tireless reporter, and he's getting the Career Achievement Award. Another award is for the article that's called The End of Retirement. And it was a scary article to read because it was all about seniors or people who are finished with their careers and their jobs, living in trailers, and having to work at Walmart's distribution centers for minimum wage because they could not and cannot live because of the cost of living and because of the pathetic Social Security amounts of a monthly income. And so it's a very realistic, well-written, expose on what's happening in the golden years of retirement.
It seems like that a lot of the economic issues seem to come up in today's program, particularly the TPP and its dramatic effect on American wages. Do you have like a sort of a sense of like future stories that you're going to be covering?
Well, I think that the economic issues that we're faced with today are definitely important in the United States, but then another part of the show was also about migrant labor, particularly coming out of Africa, and we've talked about migrant labor traveling through the Middle East as well. And so these issues of labor and economics and inequality are actually global issues, and we hope that on a weekly basis we can put them into that kind of global context so that we can see some of the structural issues that we're faced with. When you really think about it, the labor issue that is being proposed in the TPP is not likely to be dissimilar to the kinds of things that we're seeing in terms of Africa, in terms of the people and Libya who died in the ship sinking, and many others. Because as we have greater and greater inequality and more desperation, these borders become very permeable. And we see that as well in Israel-Palestine with the apartheid wall, for example, and we've talked about that, and we'll probably talk more about that in future weeks as well, the ways in which people have to cross borders in order to survive, given the global power structure, which is part corporate, part legal, part use of corporations and governments to instrumentalize legal formations and construct them throughout the world, and the way in which those formations displace people and force movement. So yes, we will continue to look at the TPP and in the context of American labor, but also hopefully bring out the broader structural issues that we are faced with, so that we can all together as a community think through how we can combat this, how we can resist, and what we can do to transform the world.
I noticed you had a call-in segment. Are you going to have call-in segments?
Today's call-in segment was about the police murder in Baltimore of Freddie Gray, and also the vaccine issue as well, which is another example of the ways in which corporations have been able to influence the legal system and work in a backwards kind of a logic. And so, yes, we will continue to have call-in segments, and we're really enjoying hearing from the listeners. The listeners have a lot to say, and this is really a community. It's community radio. And so that's part of our mission.
Over the course of the last half hour, you've seen Pam Brown in action. Pam Brown is the Tuesday morning co-host of WBAI's morning show. I was honored to be able to come to the studio to see how she and host Michael Haskins do their in-depth coverage of crucial undercovered issues that affects all of our lives. Tune in to WBAI's Monday through Friday morning show for a remarkable, hard-hitting, thoughtful show on WBAI Radio 99.5 FM and streaming at WBAI.org. I'm John Riley for Progressive Community Media. Tune in again in 2 weeks for another edition.
Everyone, just like his daddy owned us all before. Care about his college degree. Man ain't one bit better than me, and I